Hey guys, Praises here, and in the video I got for you, what we're gonna do is talk about balance. We're gonna talk about DD2 hero balance, actually, and as you can tell, we're gonna start with the Flagellant. The reason I want to start with the Flagellant is because I feel like he's pretty close to how I would like to see most characters in terms of power, in terms of character identity, and just general appeal, I would say. I love Flagellant. He's the character I have easily the most amount of experience and time with, so I feel like it would make sense to start with the Flagellant and then go down the list of other heroes, and maybe at the end of the series, because I am going to try and do every single hero, maybe we go back to Flagellant and we compare him and the general approach I have to balance and see, if I still agree with myself. Maybe we'll do that. Kind of depends on how much my opinion has changed. If it hasn't changed much at all, maybe I'll just throw it in on the Vestal video like the last one. But regardless, the video is going to discuss balance in a vacuum. So I'm not going to talk about things like trinkets, and I'm not going to talk about fixing skills through paths, because that isn't something I want to see. I want to see Wanderer be a very playable, very viable option if that's what you want to use. Kind of like Flagellant, which is again why we're starting with him. So this is very similar to the ongoing balance discussion that Shuffle FM has on his channel. The discussion on Shuffle FM's channel with Ranger has two very experienced players who have been playing since early access. I am a 1.0 player. I waited till the full release of the game, and I want to give my opinion on hero balance as more of like a recent opinion to kind of compare to theirs. Someone that, still very much enjoys the game and has been grinding the game quite a bit since it came out, because I just have a lot of fun with it, as you can tell with all the content on my channel. So it's something that I have a strong opinion on, but as long as there's some kind of interest or any kind of take you want to give, anything like that, I encourage you to leave a comment. I would like to hear what you guys think as well. And moving forward, like I said, we're just going to keep it in the scope of a vacuum. So again, just no trinket interactions, no path interactions. If something's broken by an existing trinket in the game, and this is something that I am kind of echoing from Shuffle and Ranger's discussion, I don't really care. It is a roguelike. Things are going to be broken. There's no way to guarantee items. You can increase your chance to get an item, of course, but at the end of the day, it's just a run. If it breaks the game, it breaks the game. Look at something like the Binding of Isaac and you will see what I mean. There's just things that are going to bust the game wide open, and that's part of the fun. You want memorable runs, especially since, the game, it has plenty of content to offer, especially since it's just 1.0 release right now, and DD1 got so much love, so much attention, a lot of DLC, and this game doesn't even have like mod support, for example. So there's just a big future for this game, and I think talking about the balance now, especially since we've gotten very little hero balance since 1.0, with only the occultist really getting buffed and maybe a skill or two on, like Hellion or what have you. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, really appreciate you leaving a like, and we're going to start with the Flagellant. Before we get into the video, I just want to clear up a quick point. I'm not going to talk about enemy balance too much, and I'm not going to talk about anything like rebalancing crit tokens or taunt or something, like hypotheticals like that. We're just going to look at the game engine and the tools that we have, and the only thing I want to look at is the hero when talking about that hero in the video. So starting off with the Wanderer kit and the basic skills on that, I think that Flagellant has a very healthy amount of damage and utility, and the paths do a good job of letting you lean into one or the other. He essentially acts as a frontline support, or maybe a frontline tank with, blight damage. He is very flexible, and I think that's important in a game like this, especially with the path system. You would want your characters to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of multi-purpose identity when you bring them into an adventure, an expedition, confession, whatever you want to call it. A pain point I want to bring up is his combo synergy. He does have some good combo synergy, like Scourge Sepsis. I like the way that works, but A lot of the times it ends up just being res piercing, and this is a trend for a lot of heroes. I don't really like res piercing on combo personally. I'd rather it be something a bit more unique. On Wanderer, it's fine, but if you're looking at the paths, I think that you could make them a bit more unique. So for Wanderer, you could keep res piercing to help it be more consistent and kind of have, players learn how to play around it and, ways to lean into it. They can see the value in res piercing. But if you want to be a bit more specialized, and there's plenty of res piercing items and trinkets in the game that there's too much overlap there. The distinctiveness should come in the combo synergy with the skills. So I think that for example, Maniac, you could give maybe some manner of debuff piercing, which isn't like a huge thing. There's way more like dot res piercing than there is debuff res piercing, and Maniac is more debuff focused, so that that could be good. You could give Examinate, for example, extra blight damage on combo, and for Scourge, since a big part of Scourge is the sepsis, you could give extra blight duration. These are things I would like to see help the paths become more distinct from each other instead of it just being a lot of the same. I do think that the res piercing you get off of combo now does need to be toned down though. 30% is a pretty huge amount, and if you're going to keep Wanderer with the res piercing effect, I think it would be the best interest of the health of the game to tone that down by quite a bit, especially if we get more combo feeding options, which is something I would like to see more in general for heroes in this game. I think 15% would be perfectly fine. It's more than enough to get you into a lot of healthy breakpoints for these types of situations where you would want to set up res piercing, but it also, lets the other trinkets in the game, or rather the other methods of getting res piercing, become a lot more valuable in turn, because it's not just directly competing with the inherent 30% res piercing that you can get by just building a team with combo. Flagellant also has a healthy amount of more niche skills, especially when you get into the paths and the way that they tweak moves like Suffer or Lash's Gift, that are sought after tools. He has a way to clear stun with Lash's Gift, Wanderer, and he also has a corpse clearing effect, which can be very valuable if you're doing the corpse light run and things like that. And giving the player the option to swap out maybe something that they would run almost all the time, like a ubiquitous setup where you have Punish, Acid Rain, more Deathless, and you essentially just have one last skill to swap around, and you might really want to bring Sepsis. There's a lot of competition there, which I think is a good feeling. The paths don't take away value from other skills. A trend that the old path system has, and we'll get into the more specific examples when they come up, but the old path system basically just forces you to pick between two playstyles, and Flagellant doesn't have that. Flagellant has the ability to run whatever he thinks he might need, and there's not really a lot of sacrifice there. I mean, some skills obviously lose favor, but they're still perfectly usable if you need them, or they have a more niche use. Like Acid Rain on Maniac isn't great. A lot of people say it's a bad move, but it does still exist. It's not just completely worthless, and it fits the playstyle a little bit better. And I do think Acid Rain on Maniac does need some help. It's a lot better than, say, Wicked Slice on Sharpshot, because there's literally just better options for that. The last couple key parts of Flagellant's identity, outside of being a blight character and self-damage, come in the form of Toxic. And Toxic is really interesting because it is his unique meltdown, where instead of getting a meltdown or resolute, he always gets Toxic. And Toxic is really cool because it allows him to be consistent in the high risk, high reward situations. And for a passive, at least I consider it a passive, even though it's not exactly the same as, say, Hellion or Leopard, it very much is unique to him, and it allows him to play with the mechanics of the game differently. So, fair enough, I think, to call it a passive. What it does is it allows him to be in the high risk, high reward situations and thrive in them, which I don't think Flagellant would be nearly the same. Like, not nearly the same if he didn't have Toxic. If you don't know, it gives him a unique toxic token, which is essentially a Thorns effect, where when he gets hit, it applies 2 blight to the attackers, and you can gain up to 3 of these tokens that will last until the end of combat. So they're very strong. He has -2 affinity pips with all other team members, which normally is -3 on a meltdown. It'll reset all of his skill cooldowns, so you'll get more back, you'll have sepsis, you'll have access to all of your really strong moves. If you're playing Scourge, you get your Deathless back online, which is really, really good. And instead of -15 deathblow resistance, it's actually only -10, and this will last until the next in. So if you're in the middle of like a terrible fight, that is one of the more notable disadvantages. But it'll set his HP to 30, which means if he's under, he goes to 30, he goes up to 30, but if he's over, he'll go down to 30. If you're Scourge, however, it'll be set to 45, which is much more manageable, especially with the high health pool that Flagellant has. And you actually gain extra blight damage until the end of combat. So this is pretty unique, I think. Flagellant has a lot of positions he can be in with this and just kind of come out on top. You can use the blood like no other character can, which is very interesting because he's going to love the stress that you get from that. So it's not really going to overwhelm him in any way. Stress, I mean. It's a very fun, it's a very unique passive, and I like it a lot. The other thing is Death. And Death is a very unique take on balance mechanics. At least I think it's a balance mechanic, because one, obviously it's unique to Flagellant, and it does play into the risk-reward scenarios of just bringing Flagellant in general, because you could get Death. And Death does come with Mastery and all those nice things. She has her own set of trinkets, but she also, is very much a part of Flagellant's identity. Thematically, obviously, Death is always chasing him, but also just the fear of a fight ending and Death just popping up out of nowhere is very prevalent. If you aren't like a avid Flagellant enjoyer and you forget about Death and you get jumped, it's a very unique experience. So we like Death. I think Death is a very fun mechanic, if nothing else. And it does kind of allow Flagellant to be maybe a bit more powerful than the other characters are, just because you have this additional risk. Because when you're running Flagellant, you basically have, the fear of elite enemies, you have the fear of Collector, and now you have the fear of Death just trailing behind you. The fight itself, however, isn't too bad. The worst part about it is that it comes at the end of a normal fight, so if you just had a really rough encounter and Death shows up, it can very well spell the end of your run, or at the very least one of your characters, probably Flagellant, because he gets a -50% DPR for this fight, so watch out for that. She spreads a lot of horror and a lot of bleed, but she is pretty weak to dot attacks. Not bleed, but blight and burn can kind of eat away at her. She does get multiple actions, so that helps a lot. So I don't think the fight itself is too terrible. Plus, the move that you really need to watch out for, which is Trample, that can really mess up your team, is a full cleave and it can shuffle your party. It is relatively telegraphed. She has to get to the back. She's in between 2 tombstones as her positioning tool, so if she gets to the last 2 spots and she uses Trample, you can kind of prepare for it as best as you can. But at the end of the day, I don't think the fight is too bad. I like that it exists so that Flagellant is allowed to be a little bit stronger. Thematically, it's really cool. Death just following Flagellant, and the mastery you get from it, and the trinkets, while they aren't the best, I would like to see some of the trinkets rebalanced. There are some pretty good trinkets there. So we like Death, like I said, and I don't really see her needing too much of a change. Honestly, I think she's just pretty good the way she is. I wouldn't change much about her. Again, I'm not huge on enemy balance. My knowledge on that isn't super in-depth, but if Death shows up, could be good, could be awful. So I'm going to go through the skills real quick for Wanderer, and then we'll talk about the past and how they influence those a little bit. I know I kind of touched on it just now, but just to quickly go over them. I wouldn't really touch Punish or Acid Rain for the reasons I said earlier. Obviously tone down the res piercing a little bit, but other than that, I think it's fine. I love Fester. I think it's a perfect kind of niche move where you don't always bring it, but there's definitely situations where you want to really bring it. Deathless is really powerful. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's too powerful, especially since it's balanced by the fact that he takes 20% damage. And honestly, the fact that it doesn't have a healing threshold, I think makes it feel much more powerful than it really is. But I don't super agree with healing thresholds in general, especially the way that they're implemented now on specific types of healing moves. So just keep that in mind. Endure is a great move. It serves an amazing purpose, and it has really nice synergy with things like, Inspiring Tune or Vulture, where you can put the stress on Flage and then just heal it off with those moves. Lash's Gift on Wanderer is actually really nice and a very, very strong move. I like it a lot. It's, again, not always going to be one that you're going to use, but if you want a super tanky Flage, you could run more and Lash's Gift, and you could just, even on the turns where he's healing himself, he's still providing a lot to his team, which is a really unique trait. He has a lot of high tempo like that, and I like it a lot. More is a skill you're almost always going to want to bring, and I think that's good. I think confidently I can say that's good because it does have a huge thematic tie, but also just gameplay in general. Since he's always hurting himself using this, maybe not every other turn, obviously, but it is one that you want to consider when it's off cooldown. At least, taking assessment of the way that everything's going in the battle. It's, not always going to get the same amount of value, but it will always get at least some consistent value. It could be a little overtuned. I'd really like to know what you guys think about more and just how it ties into the whole playstyle for Flagellant. If you have any idea on how you might change it, I'd love to hear it. Just leave a comment for me. Suffer is a move that might need a little bit of help. If I had to give it anything, I would say maybe a little bit more DBR on Master. And when you do Master it, you could maybe reduce the cooldown. I don't really see a problem with that, especially since, and by reduce the cooldown, I should specify remove it, because it already has a 1-turn cooldown. Because you do need to steal the Blight, so it's required that someone, or the dot rather, it's required that somebody has it. So I don't really see a problem with it getting a little bit more DBR, maybe like plus 15 instead of plus 10, and just allowing you to spam it if you really want to, so you can stack that DBR. It would really help, say, Examine It, who wants to stay at low health. Sepsis is amazing. I think Sepsis is a really nice move, the way that it's implemented for Wanderer, because it, like I said, it has that like kind of tempo energy where you need to be under 50%, so you can't use it all the time, but it does allow him to heal up a pretty significant amount, 50% on Mastery actually, and deal a lot of damage. So it's a good move, and it helps newer players kind of, see where Flagellant, in his strengths lie. If you really like hitting the really strong Sepsis or what have you, you can kind of look at the pass and take it from there. But if you really just like the healing on it, you might just, look into Maniac or something. So, it has a multi-purpose, and it's not overly strong in the damage department, so it does kind of help in that situation. I mean, the Blight on it's really strong, but you also have to get under 50% to use it. So, and that is another one that has combo res piercing. So again, just bring that down to like 15, maybe 10%, depending on how they want to balance that in the future. And we're moving on to Undying. And Undying is really interesting because it's another source of healing. So you can run 2 healing skills on Flagellant. And I don't think that this one is overbearing in any way. I actually kind of like it because it's a source of regeneration, which this game doesn't have a lot of. And it's a strong one at that. You aren't always going to bring it, but if you really want like a super defensive Flagellant, you might run more Undying, Deathless, Punish, and Sepsis depending, and you can really just make like a super tanky Flash. You don't even have to run Sepsis, so you could run Lash's Gift, for Wander at least. So he has a lot of options in terms of support, but also in terms of just keeping everybody healthy. And Necrosis is a really interesting move that, obviously the more Blight you have on your team, the better it will be, and it really helps him stay super healthy if that's your goal, to keep him healthy but also have like a nice offensive momentum. Necrosis is good, and with a 1-turn cooldown you can just spam it and keep Flagellant pretty healthy. An important note before I talk about Flagellant and the paths he has, I want to say that he's definitely ahead of everybody else in terms of the system he's on, but also in terms of the quality of the path itself. I feel like when you compare his paths to the rest of the cast, it's kind of weird that they're not all there with him, and I do think that they will eventually get there with him. But a quick comparison I want to make is basically any of Flagellant's paths compared to Sharpshot. It doesn't make any sense. Sharpshot is a restrictive path that doesn't have very much engagement at all. It just gives you straight damage and speed, so naturally it's going to be the best because you just get bigger numbers in this game. It's almost like, I don't want to say lazy because that's a little rude and honestly like a little disingenuous, but you're basically like forcing the player into a funnel that you have to use range attacks. And Flagellant's paths don't do that. They're much more open-ended and allow for a lot more player expression than, you know, take aim and double tap, for example. It just, you know, that's something you're going to do all the time with Highwayman, but Flagellant has so much more flexibility in the way he's designed that I feel like it's the reason why I wanted to start with Flagellant. But small tangent over. Maniac is a great path for a lot of reasons, but one of the things I really like about it is it actually does what it says on the box. A lot of it, characters or paths just kind of mislead you in a big way. It just straight up says you sacrifice Blight potency in favor of flexible position, debuff, and disruption, which is exactly what it does. Acid Rain doesn't even have any Blight. Sepsis has nothing to do with Blight. Punish has 2 Blight regardless of mastery or not, so it does exactly what it says on the box. Like that a lot. And yeah, you can use him in basically any position. I wouldn't put him in 4. I mean, you could use it. You can still use Sepsis, Lash's Gift, and all that stuff, but like Acid Rain is just such a not good move, and it's definitely probably the weakest point about Maniac. If Acid Rain was actually a good move, Maniac would be in a lot better spot, I would think, in terms of flexible positioning. But the debuff and disruption is very, very real. Knockback on Punish is something that can go a very long way. Knockback effects in general can be very strong if you know how to exploit the enemy's weaknesses in their positioning. So what I have to say about Maniac is nothing but positive for the most part in terms of the identity of the path. Some of the skills are not the best though. I don't really just Acid Rain now that I'm looking at it. It has the same on-hit damage, but it loses Blight and instead gains 1 weaken. And on Mastery, it still only has 1 weaken, but a 33% chance to add combo. And I just don't think that's worth it. There's very little reason to use this move when there is so many better options. Punish is still perfectly viable, and then you're going to want Sepsis and Lash's Gift, and depending on where you put him, you're probably going to want more, or maybe Undying. You know, there's just, with the competition that the Flagellant has running Maniac, it's just, there's not really any room for a move that's so lackluster. I would personally love to see the on-hit damage go up and then adding a second weaken token, and you can remove the combo potential effect. It's just, I don't really see it being super worth it. I do want to see more combo synergy in this game. Like, I would love to see more moves feed combo, but I don't think this is a move that super needs it, especially when Punish has knockback 2 and it gives combo already. I would much rather see the on-hit damage just come up a little bit and then add a second weaken token. And then you could, you know, really find a use for it in cases like the Tangle where you don't want to deal with the Arbalist or even the General just to help keep his damage down a little bit. Even though he does mostly stress damage and whatnot, you could find much better use cases for it than where it is now. Exanimate is a good path for a few reasons. One, it's like Maniac and it does what it says on the box. Low health grants great potency to Blight and buff alike. And one big notable thing about this path is it wants you to be at low health, and it gives you a couple things to help keep you there and play within that range. The biggest thing about this is probably the Lash's Gift change, which makes it heal 10%. You remove all negatives and you remove combo, but you gain crit and dodge. But if it's mastered, you gain strength, crit, and dodge plus. This is a pretty good Lash's Gift. The biggest thing being you have to be under 20%, where most of his other effects you only have to be under 50. So it is, you know, not something you're going to hit all the time. And he is a front rank character. Punish can't be used in 3 like a lot of his other paths can. And you're basically stuck to 1 and 2 for Punish, Acid Rain, and Sepsis, which are you know, the big moves in Examine It. Those are the ones that change. The on-hit damage for Punish stays 3 to 6, 4 to 8, and Acid Rain stays 2 to 3, 3 to 4. But Punish actually has a little bit less Blight. It has 2 and then 3. Same thing with Acid Rain, 2 and then 3 on Master. But the nice thing about this is you gain 2 more Blight damage if you're under 50% health. So this turns Acid Rain into a really powerful attack. The biggest reason why you would probably take this, even though you can use Punish to hit rank 3 with this, if you really don't need Acid Rain, for example. But, you know, having a really strong Acid Rain is good because you can cleave the back line really efficiently. And the Sepsis is changed so that you remove the remaining Blight in an enemy and you heal to 45. So you do have to be under 50% health. I don't see any problem with this path, honestly. There's not a whole lot I would change about it. I don't know if increasing the Blight on Punish to make it stand out a little bit more from Acid Rain, just in that way, because them dealing the same amount of Blight is interesting, but to me it seems like Punish should maybe do a little bit more, just 1 point more. It's kind of weird that the Blight path, like the heavy Blight path, Punish has like a little bit less. I know it gets more when it's under 50%, but you can't always guarantee that. So plus it would just reward it more. I think Examine is the one that needs the most help. I don't know exactly what I would give it. The Sepsis is interesting, but in my opinion it's just a weaker Scourge Sepsis. And the Last's Gift is really strong. Being under 20% health is kind of a big ask. I would maybe make it under 30%. I don't think it'd be that broken, honestly. If it did end up being that broken, you could just give it a cooldown so you can't spam it to stay alive, which, you know, might be a bigger nerf than I know. This is the path I've used the least. So if you guys have any ideas on what you would give it, I think it might need a little bit of something. Scourge is the path that I have the most experience with and the most to say about, so I'll try to keep it brief because I can make a whole video on Scourge itself. This one is a little bit less clear, and it's one of the actual critiques I have of this path. It says a role that revels in divesting others of their burdens. Toxic state gains new effects. The biggest issue I have with this is not really the flavor text, but the part where it says toxic state gains new effects. It should really elaborate on what changes, because I feel like that's really important and would encourage people to actually try the path more. Because when you look at the skills, you see Sepsis, which is like Examine It Sepsis, but on Unmastered it's only 50% and you don't heal to 45%. But if there's combo on the target, it doesn't actually remove the Blight, it won't cure them, it'll stay. So you end up just dealing a lot of damage all at once, and then they continue to take the rest of it, effectively doubling the Blight damage, which is a really strong move, and I think much better than Examine It Sepsis, personally. It also doesn't have a use limit, so that's nice. Deathless on this is ridiculously strong. It doesn't hurt Flagellant anymore, but instead heals him, and for quite a bit. It has 25% healing on the other target, on your teammate, and 35% on Mastered. But it heals Flagellant 35% and then 50% when Mastered. So since it's 50%, it's a ridiculous amount of scaling with any, you know, healing with skills or anything like that, trinkets or effects you come across. So you can just shoot them right back to full health even without more. It does have 3 uses and a 2-turn cooldown, but since you're already melting him down so often, you know, in boss fights where you might need this move, cooldowns are reset when you hit Toxic, so you don't have to worry about that as much. Suffer is buffed on this path, so you can actually seal Horror. So it just requires that the teammate you use it on has either a dot or Horror, and then you take that, and then at the end of next turn, it'll remove the dot if you've upgraded it. And he does get the extra DBR, which is nice. And then Lash's gift is unique, like it is on most of his paths. I don't think any of his paths have a unchanged Lash's gift, now that I think about it, now that we're talking about it. Actually, they don't, which is a nice thing about Flagellant. It feels like he was designed with Lash's gift being any manner of buff, or, you know, they have the creative liberty to change this move around, which I think other heroes could benefit from. But anyway, you gain Horror, so using it just straight up gives you Horror, and then you remove any dots that you have, and if it's mastered, you gain dot resistance per dot removed. So basically, if you cure dot, you get, if you cure bleeding, you gain 20% bleed resistance but just bleed resistance. It's not like you'll gain it for every dot. Scourge has a very interesting playstyle, and I rather enjoy the way that you lean into Toxic with this path. And what Toxic does differently is instead of setting your HP to 30, it sets it to 45, and you'll deal 1 more blight damage until the end of combat. I'm fairly certain, and I can't believe I haven't actually looked at the numbers or tested it with 100% certainty, but I'm fairly certain that it scales per meltdown. So you can get up to like 3, because I think it scales with a Toxic token. Could be wrong though. If I'm wrong, I'll let you know. Because like I said, I intend on making a whole video on Scourge eventually. But you end up just dealing so much blight damage during boss fights where you want to melt down constantly. And it can save you in certain situations because you gain a little bit more health, which is also really nice. I don't think there's anything I would change about this path. But if there's something that you guys think might be a little bit too strong, maybe Deathless needs 1 less use, something like that, let me know. I hope this video didn't come across as a Flagellant appreciation video. While I am a huge fan of Flagellant, he's my favorite character. I picked him for a couple reasons. 1, he's the character I have the most experience with. 2, he definitely has the most attention in terms of path diversity. I mean, he has his own mini-boss. He just has the most personality and the most character, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the game. In the sense that he just has a lot of content surrounding him. He has a lot of work put into him. And I want to see that same kind of work, love, and attention put into all the other characters. I'm not saying every character needs their own mini-boss, obviously, but I think things like that make Flagellant a very fleshed out character in this game. I would love to see, say, Plague Doctor get paths just like Flagellant's paths, where they're a lot more catered to an individual playstyle. Or, you know, when you hear path, you think of like a skill path or a path that you might walk down. I want to see it more focused, and instead of it being kind of general. And I'm sure they'll all get there, but I think it's a lot of fun to talk about the potentials these reworks have, and you know, what we might see in the future. So if there's a character you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. I might do them next. And if there's anything else you want to see out of these balance breakdowns, let me know. Like I said, I know this one wasn't too negative, and I didn't tackle individual problematic skills because I don't feel he has any. I was more using this as an opportunity to flesh out what these videos might look like and what you guys want to see out of these videos. So again, any kind of feedback is really appreciated. And in the next one, I'm going to try and do a character that is as far away from Flagellant as possible. There's a couple I have in mind, but like I said, I'd love to see what you guys want to see in the comments. I just want to say thank you for watching the video to the end. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of ideas for this video and for this series, so any kind of feedback is super appreciated. And in the future, I'm going to tackle, you know, the individual problems of a hero maybe a little bit more head on, and there's going to be a bit more theory crafting, and there's going to be a bit more deliberation, and I'm going to try my best to throw out as many ideas as I can think of to kind of give a broader idea of where these characters can go in terms of their paths, in terms of skill balancing, and maybe even just a couple different, you know, problem childs in the game. Some people might not like taunt, some people might not like crit, like I was saying earlier. So if you guys have like a specific problem with the balance in the game, I'd love to hear it, because honestly, there's a lot to talk about in this game. It's a pretty big game, pretty in-depth, a lot of mechanics at play. So if you appreciated the video, please leave a like and subscribe for the next one. Take it easy, guys.